Before Arın sits, I have to tell this is extremely exciting for me because the main reason that I wanted to speak with Arın is me and Arın were partners in another startup back in 2012, 11.
At the end of 11.
At the end of
12,
11. And for me, actually, the angel investing side of things started with that adventure. And when we figured it out that we ran out of money in that startup and start looking for other options, that's where we start meeting with the angels and angel investing. And that's how my story started on the investment side. And mainly what we want to talk about when we meet today is what has changed between then and now, and how his approach and his position is helping him understand what the ecosystem is going to. And I would like to start with actually the first point there, where since our adventure ended with our positions in Lastik Pabuç, your new position in Revo Capital, and tell us about that a little bit, and then please share how your experience with Lastik Pabuç helped understand the ecosystem right now.
Sure.
And one more question to add to that is, what is how much of an empathy can you find with the startups today?
With that experience.
Yes.
Is what you're asking probably, yeah. So brief background on me. I work at Revo, which is a VC firm based out of Istanbul that invests in Turkey as well as in Eastern Europe as well. So we are one of the largest funds in Turkey with $66 million of assets under management, 19 investments now, 16 in Turkey, 3 outside of Turkey. Some of the investments that you may know are Getir, Onedio, Parachute, Sinemia, so a lot of both consumer and enterprise startups. And as Sinan said, we met back in 2011 when we invested in a company called Lastik Pabuç, which was a sneaker store that was trying to, I would say, establish a lifestyle fashion brand and trying to grow its business. So I would say we were a bit more than investors. We were quite active, and I didn't know that was your first investment. Actually.
That was my first investment.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
That was my first, and now I try to tell the story in a way that the 19 other investments that I made are the same size with what I did in Lastik Pabuç, which was a big lesson for me.
Yeah. That was cool. Yeah, that was quite a large investment for to be a first investment. So anyway. We were quite active in the company as well. So I used to work at a company called Ünlü back then, and I would come out of my daily job and go to the office in Karaköy and try and help the rest of the team with a lot of different things. So I would say the main effect that it had on me is, I guess, twofold. So one of them, I got to see the operational side of things. I got some operational experience from it. We did work on product, we did work on accounting, we did data entry into the horrible Netsys ERP system, if you remember. So we did a lot of things around, building the company and forming teams and managing teams and all that sort of stuff. So that was, I think, one of the benefits for me. But the other one, I think that was probably much more beneficial for me today, at least, is seeing the psychological side of things. So over I don't know, it was like 1.5 to 2 years. It was quite a roller coaster ride. So we got to see a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and we got to see, how both the team and the investors and the founders reacted to that, and what sort of a psychological state they were in, and how we handled that whole thing. So I think today, the main sort of benefit to me is that I know, how hard it is. I know now that one of the main, I think, jobs of an investor is to provide that uplift to the entrepreneur. So, it's again twofold. You have to do the operational work. You have to help with, building a good team. You have to help with providing a business network. You have to help with helping them out with product and strategy and all that sort of stuff. But even probably more important than that, you have to help with the psychological aspect of the journey, where you have to encourage the founders, because he'll probably fall down multiple times, so you have to pick him back up. You have to be a positive support in his journey. He'll be looking at things sometimes very narrowly because it's his day-to-day job. You have to provide a broader sort of point of view. So I think that's the main benefit that I got back then.
I think that what I've seen from that experience is also that the team, as we were in the operation day-to-day basis, I think that the team has to have a clear idea of where it should head.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's one of the things that I got as a lesson when I'm talking with the teams right now and what I'm trying to do with my own jobs. Since that time and now with your, again, position, what has changed? What has been the 3 aspects of Turkish ecosystem that improved in general?
Well, I would say number 1 is definitely the investment side of things. So, 10 years ago, over like in 2009-ish to 2011, I think there were only a handful of angel networks, venture capital investors. I think the total money invested in the market was around $20 million. Last year it was around 200 million. So it's been a tenfold growth over there. And I think there are over 35 angel networks and VC investors today. So number 1 is definitely the investment side. So there's a lot of more money on the ecosystem now, and I think it's a good time to be an investor. There are a lot of new funds being formed right now as well, across different stages. We are raising our next fund as well. So there'll be a lot of money in Turkey in the next 4 to 5 years. The other one is the exit side of things. So traditionally, we all know Gitti Gidiyor, Yemek Sepeti, all these sort of successful stories, but on top of that, there wasn't really much to talk about until very recently. So in the last year and a half, there were a number of deals that were over $250 million of exits. So there was Gram Games that sold to Zynga, there was Opsgenie that sold to Atlassian, there was Trendyol's large deal, Citrus that recently exited to Microsoft, and all these sort of large exits, which is helping the ecosystem, in 2 ways. It's helping the entrepreneurs sort of believe that, there can be good stories, there can be success stories, and then it's also helping both local but more so foreign investors to come into the market as well. But the most important one, I think, is a recent change in the mindset of the entrepreneur. So what I mean by that is, over the last, I think, couple of years, everyone's been talking about this pretty much, that Turkish entrepreneurs need to move outside much more quickly. So the problem with Turkey traditionally has been that it's like a mid-sized market. What I mean by that is it's not a small market. It's not Estonia. It's not Lithuania, Latvia. It's not the Baltics. It's not Ukraine. But it's also not US, UK, China. It's not a large market. So the problem, it's much more similar to Poland, where the problem is that entrepreneurs are generally focused on the local market, and they think that it's large enough, but in many of the verticals, it's not. So because it's much more convenient, it's something that they're used to, they always target this local market, and they can't really go outside of Turkey, which makes the companies that they're building not large enough for either VC investors to come in or for things that they want to build. So over the last year and a half, I think both owing to these exits that I mentioned, but also probably a bit owing to the unfortunate macroeconomic and political sort of developments, a lot of founders that we see are actually going abroad very quickly, which I think is going to benefit the ecosystem as a whole, because they'll be bringing back the experience much more quickly, and they'll be able to grow much more quickly as well.
I think that especially on the second part, creating the history of the exits, creating the stories of exits. We talked with Erhan Hoca in our last meeting with Hype and at the 1907 Derneği headquarters. The one thing that we talked about is how we're going to influence the athletes into investing more into the ecosystem. And I told him that I think that there needs to be a story of an exit before I start saying that, look, there is very lucrative opportunities here.
So let me turn back the spotlight on since you said that.
However you want.
Why are you angel investing? So What's the sort of the rationale for you? Is it more financially driven, or is it, you want to be involved in these sort of startups that you feel close to, or is it, you want to be involved in tech, or how does it work for
I
you?
think, yeah, well, it's a combination of all of those things, but I think that, of course, there is a financial drive to it. The one thing is that I don't really enjoy, although it is a safe investment, I don't really enjoy the traditional investment styles and what you can do with, I don't know, real estate or, stock exchange and all that stuff. I think that especially in a volatile environment, I think that seems more risky than being a part of a story. And as we talked in the beginning, being part of a startup with a larger investment, it really taught me quick to actually separate that fund into different things and be a part of different stories. And I think that sharing my experience in basketball in any way possible creates an opportunity for me to gain some kind of spot in the ecosystem, not only with the funding that I can provide, but at the same time with the insight that, as you mentioned, as a founder, there might be some other things that I can see as an investor that some people cannot see. And I'm trying to use that, and I think that after my career is over, there's going to be a lot more opportunities, even though maybe I might not invest as quickly. I might find some other opportunities to make myself available in this environment. That's the main
You'll
thing.
have more time, right? So
Yeah, that's for sure. Speaking of that, I want to move into the idea of the opportunity that we have here. This is amazing, being in this stadium, having Fenerbahçe involved in this accelerated program. On your side, what can be done for sports organizations like Fenerbahçe to be more involved with the startup ecosystem in Turkey?
Well, I think the path is going to resemble, with sports clubs becoming more involved. I think it's very similar to how corporations are becoming more involved in Turkey right now. So, what used to be the case was, not a lot of corporations in Turkey worked with startups. They didn't really partner with startups. They definitely didn't invest in any, like 5 or 6 years ago. But what happened was, a lot of startups started selling their services. So you have to find the first few believers probably, but they started selling their services to corporations. These corporations started creating value. They got, better gross margins. They got, better efficiency. They were able to build on their product, make something bigger. So which made them believe in this more. So now what you're seeing is there are a lot of corporate venture capitals being built. There are a lot of accelerators being built by large banks, corporations. So there's more and more starting to get into the ecosystem. So I think more usage of startups will accelerate that definitely. And then the other thing I think that happened was so Parachute, one of our investments, for example, they I think worked for over a year, close to a year and a half, to integrate their first bank, which was Akbank. But after that, the second bank that wanted to become integrated and they started working with, I think came in like less than 2 months. And it just accelerated very quickly after that. So there is this sort of effect where if one of the sports clubs, for example, was to start using this technology and incorporating this and all that sort of stuff, I think it makes it much more easier for other corporations and clubs and etc. to use this. So probably what we'll need to see is, some pioneer club, maybe Fenerbahçe, as they're doing this, start using more of this, services from different startups, both locally and, regionally, so that they'll set a good example for other
And I think
teams
that
as well.
I think that also esports going to be a similar story within itself because and they both going to complement each other in a way.
On that, let me turn that back on you as well.
Yes, of course.
So since you're a professional athlete and you know how teams work and how clubs work, I know that, for example, in Güler Legacy, I think in your camps you have this basketball that does analytics on how players are
that actually
performing
went
or
bankrupt,
training.
I think.
Yeah, they did?
We weren't an investor. We were actually
Yeah,
the sole
you were
user
using-
with it. Arın is mentioned about a basketball which had a Bluetooth chip itself that connects itself to the phone, and it could analyze the release time of the basketball from the hand, catching and release time, the backspin motion of it, and the angle of it when it's approaching to the basket. And this gives you analytics to improve your shooting. One thing that happened with that is I think they were trying to have a deal with Spalding, and it went to the other way. They couldn't do it.
Right.
And after that, I stopped hearing from them. I think Wilson is making something similar, more gamified version of it. And at the same time, now with the new chips that the iOS phones have, iPhones have, there's an app called Home Court that actually does all the stuff just using the camera of the phone. You just need to set it up, and you don't need a basketball that has technology in it, which gives a lot more opportunity for kids to play with it.
Rather than
so I think that that part was we trying to implement it.
But what
Turkey.
I was trying to come to was like, you yourselves were using, different technologies in training, for training in your camps. Why do you think, or what's the sort of current stage with clubs in Turkey in terms of using technology? And, how is it compared to the way that other clubs in the world use technology?
I think it's a slow approach. There's always, we were talking with some other startups and some other people before. The main thing is that to buy into an idea in Turkey culturally, I think in Mediterranean mostly, but Turkey is a big example of that, we need some kind of success story of it before realizing that this helps. And, as Güler Legacy, we try to do this and create opportunities for other people to use it, but at the same time, it's not quite easy to implement everybody because especially analytics sides, normally coaches usually come with an approach saying that, yes, I know what this is doing and I can do it myself. So it's not quite easy. One other question. You and I have different hats in investor side. While I'm talking, maybe the budgets and ticket size are smaller, you're working with a lot bigger sizes funding. And one thing that I see in my experience is that the Turkish startups, they try to reach to angel investors before even trying to set up their own shop themselves.
So raising capital is a target.
Yes,
right? Yeah.
And I believe that for Turkish ecosystem and the startups to be successful and reach more exits, I think that the VC funds and angel funds should come closer in a way that angel funds actually should have more ticket size, the bigger ticket size than what they're looking for right now. I want you to elaborate on that a little bit.
So I think currently there are two underfunded stages in investing in Turkey. One of them is the $4 to, I would say, $10 million sort of ticket sizes, so large ticket sizes. That is, not really a 30 to 40 million dollars or euros of VC fund sort of a stage. So you need a bigger fund for that. And it's too small for like private equities or outside investors to invest in. So if you're looking for let's say $6 to $7 million in Turkey, you definitely can't really find it right now, and you need to go outside. And then the other stage that's, I think, underfunded in Turkey is the ticket size that's between $200,000 to $500,000, I would say. So the VCs in Turkey generally can go as low as 500,000. It just, it makes sense with their portfolio management to go as low as that. And for angels, I think, a $300,000 ticket is quite large. You would need to have a very sort of large money, allocated for angel investing. So I think what's going to happen is there will be a couple of like smaller funds, 10 to 15 million, maybe $10 million funds that are being formed to target those stages. Either that's the one way to go. So I think 500 is doing, larger tickets now. Starters Up, I think, is also trying to invest out of that. But I think the other way to go around this is to build syndicates, probably. So angel networks are trying this. This is what angel networks are for generally. But maybe try and build like more dedicated syndicates that, AngelList, for example, has.
Yes.
There's a lead investor, angel investor, who's very sort of experienced in this, and then he has a group of other angels that believe a lot in him, and then they invest together. So I think something like that makes much more sense, and I think that is an underfunded stage. So a lot of like entrepreneurs have the trouble of raising that sort of in between round in Turkey. I agree. But coming back to your first point, yeah, I think raising capital should never be the end goal for an entrepreneur anyway. So you shouldn't try to raise VC money or angel money or whatever. You should try to establish a good business, make money. The angel money or the VC money mainly works to buy you time and expertise. So we provide you with the runway for you to try and find product market fit, which is a cool way of saying, make something that people want. And then we provide you with the expertise to help you achieve that goal. But other than that, we're just like a enabler in your journey, and it's not really the end target, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you. My final question is, the sports has a social impact aspect of it's within itself, and I think that's why sports and innovation and sports and the ecosystem should meet and would create a lot of opportunities. With Revo Capital and your position, is there an approach of social impact in your fund and in your approach, or to move the question to a different way, do you talk to your to your startups in a way that they should have a social impact side of business in one way or another?
Honestly, Revo specifically doesn't have a mandate to do impact investing, as they call it, to do social, to invest in companies that are socially impactful. But the way, at least I view, and I think we as a team view it at Revo, is that first of all, it's always it provides you a personal satisfaction to invest in things that are doing something good for the community, for people in general. Mm-hmm. But other than that, the reason I find socially impactful startups and the founders more exciting than others sometimes is that building startups it's very hard, right? So it's a very hard journey and all that sort of stuff. So if you're doing something, if you're a founder that's trying to do something that is socially impactful, and if you have built this, it means that you believe a lot in it generally, right? So you are very committed to it, you're very driven, and you'll have a very high grit, mm-hmm. let's say, to accomplish this. So what I found is, and you will be able to to recruit a team for it as well, much easier, because it's meaningful, right? Mm-hmm. So you're doing something meaningful, yes. Anyway. So people want to join your cause. So I think that's something that makes socially impactful startups very exciting, and that there should be more in Turkey, definitely. But no, I mean, we don't really have a specific mandate on it. Okay. We just are much more happy to see them, to be honest.
Great. Thank you for sharing the stage with us. If you have any questions, by the way, before we stop, Erhan Hocam, I don't know what is the... We're waiting for them. We can continue talking then maybe. Or again, yeah, if you have any questions before we get off the stage, we would be more than happy to help and answer.
On how many on your investments were you on the leaderboard? Because I heard some of the startups here, they are requesting people to become a member of the board. Mm-hmm. So have you been ever in the board?
Not really. No, because as an active player, I don't really want to prioritize myself in a way that I'm actively doing something. But at the same time, I try to at least annually meet with the team one way or another to talk to how the process is going, and if they're looking for any additional funding, I try to find a reason to call my friend Arın to ask for money.
Yeah, I think advisory board, I think what you do is pretty much advisory. Yeah,
I try to mentor and advise in many things, and right now, for example, with this team and with this Accelerator program, I try to get in touch with all of the startups who made it to this day to understand one way or another if I'm a customer of it, if my company is a customer of it, or if I can find a way to help them establish something. But at the same time, that part is very time consuming and I think mentally also demanding. So I don't want to put too much time and mental power to it at this point. Sam, you were going to ask a question or no? Yes.
Pretty similar focus, to be honest. We're hoping for a 60 to 90 million euro fund that will invest in B2B cloud businesses, so a lot of enterprise SaaS. That'll invest in fintech as well. That'll invest in marketplaces, so pretty generalist fund. We are adding health IT, so like a 10% of the fund, on top of what we used to do in this fund as well. But other than that, pretty similar focus, a bit more allocation to Eastern Europe, hopefully.
As Rebel Capital, how would you rate the intervention to your investment
Level of?
intervention?
Meaning how we intervene.
Exactly. I mean, do you intervene into the daily operations of these businesses? And because Turkey is a totally different environment, or from a culture point of view.
Sure. I wouldn't say we intervene. I don't think that's the right word. So we contribute. Yeah. I mean, we have a role as, you know, we define our role as the role of a co-pilot, let's say, where we try to, as I was saying, you know, one of the main jobs of an investor, I think, is to sort of uplift the entrepreneur, right? So we try and enable them to do businesses at the best of their potential, trying to get the obstacles out of their way, both giving them operational feedback, giving them, you know, help and support as, you know, peers as well, and all that sort of stuff, and opening up our business network, helping them with their next stage of fundraising, using our connections and all that. But intervene, I mean, we can't really run the businesses that we invest in. We don't want to do that. That's why we are minority shareholders in things that we invest in. So we are generally, you know, 15% to 20% shareholders. We're never majority. This is not something that we're interested in. Because it's the founders that are building all these companies and growing them, hopefully.
Final question.
Sinan, your fellow players, do they follow your footsteps? Do you guys talk about investing? Do they come and ask you stuff? Are you able to bring in other players into this world?
Around the time with Lastik Pavuç, our investment then, I also invested small part in a messaging application with two of my fellow teammates back then. They're both also national team players at the time. It was an experience for us all together in one way for me to see if I can actually lead an investment in any size. It was a small size investment to lead my colleagues in a way, in that way. And at the same time, it was just an experience to see how this happens. That's when I realized it's hard to convince players to invest their money on startup ecosystem at this point because I don't have a story to back it up on. Sometimes I have the conversation with them on what can be done, but most of the time they are actually working on saving and improving their own capital, and they have their own ideas. So I'm hoping to get the opportunity of a story to back it up with before pulling more investors on that side with me.
Is what's happening globally like helping you with that? So, you know,
Not
with
really.
all Kevin Durant and Curry and all these sort of...
The funny thing is, I think that all of the NBA players, first of all, I think the opportunities that they get to get tax breaks with the investment is so much larger than what can be done here.
All right.
And at the same time, in current state, in Europe, mostly the club pays the players' tax of the salary.
Yes.
And I think that's the main problem where we don't get any tax break from it. Even if I'm a licensed angel investor, I could not get any tax break from that. I think that's one thing. And second, usually with the amount of money that they make, which, you know, some players make $150 million contracts for 5 years, they have a team of people who
Yeah, who
is
are managing
actually
it.
running that money. And
Yeah,
they
sure,
then they can make decisions on what to invest on and everything. And I think that we are so far away from that industry at this point.
That's why you should be LPs and funds.
Maybe. But
Pitching my second fund.
but thank you very much for listening to us, and Erhan Hoca.